Focus continues on the Medivac repeal and where to next. Of course, there's been a lot of discussion that Jackie Lambie has secured an arrangement with the government to pursue the New Zealand deal. The government said that's always been on the table. Well, we've got some developments now. Our colleague Jackson Williams has sat down with an exclusive interview with the New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern in Wellington.
The Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison has left the door open to accepting New Zealand's long-standing refugee resettlement offer. Just to be clear, this offer does remain on the table?
Oh yes, that has not changed, but as I've said, the ball is obviously in Australia's court.
Has there been any discussion between the two governments in recent days regarding the deal?
No, I have had no discussions at that level, and as I say, as far as I'm concerned...
So you haven't had discussions though, but have any officials had
As
discussions?
far as I'm concerned, we're still in the same status quo we've been in for some time.
Do you hope, does that annoy you? Do you hope that Australia takes this offer up?
Look, as I've said, the offer was made under a previous government.
Yeah, but surely you don't want the hundreds of refugees remaining in limbo.
You will have heard me speak multiple times on this. Of course, it's not about what New Zealand hopes or wants. Ultimately, the ball has sat with Australia domestically for quite some time.
You could nonetheless apply more public pressure.
Oh, that just demonstrates to me that you missed a period where there was much debate about this issue some years ago.
Why not bring that debate back? The Morrison government's number one concern with this offer is that it creates a backdoor to Australia as refugees resettled in New Zealand would eventually be free to move to Australia. Is there anything New Zealand could do at this end to address that?
My view is that continues to be a matter for Australia. Of course, the way that they choose to place restriction on movement within Australia's borders is something for them, not for New Zealand.
But wouldn't it create a tier of second-class citizens in New Zealand if there's this cohort of refugees who are essentially banned from travelling across the Tasman?
And again, if that were a scenario that were created, it would be created by Australia and ultimately would be within their own domestic policy if they chose to do that.
You would be comfortable with such an arrement?
It would be a matter for them.
But you'd be comfortable with it, just to be clear?
Oh, of course, we would want to maintain as much consistency as we're able to in the treatment of New Zealand citizens, but it is a domestic issue in the same way that I, of course, cannot tell Australia to stop deporting those who have no connection to New Zealand. I will express a view on it, but it is still a matter for them.
Just on that, if Australia accepted the offer, would you want something in return, such as Australia to stop deporting criminals?
That is not how we operate our relationship. And those who have been, of course, covering us for some time will know that that's just not the way New Zealand and Australia work. We have a good, robust, strong relationship, the closest you'll find of any two nations in the world.
That Australia seems to take advantage of.
Oh, well, that closeness means that we'll speak very frankly with our friends when there are policies that we disagree with.
Jacinda Ardern confirming there to Jackson Williams that the offer, the refugee offer, 150 refugees per year, is still on the table. The status quo remains, she says. And interestingly there as well, in relation to the prospect of a second-class New Zealand citizen, she says that's not something of her government's making. If that were to eventuate, it would be Australian domestic policy. But from the sounds of that interview there, it would not preclude that refugee deal being taken up. And under this arrangement that we believe that the government has agreed to with Jackie Lambie, that is to pursue that New Zealand arrangement. But the government's only ever said they'll do that if they can stop a backdoor entry to Australia, i.e. they can block those refugees from ever coming to Australia. Well, from what the Prime Minister Ardern said there, she says that's a matter for domestic politics in Australia. It's not something of her concern, which is interesting. It seems like there is very much a window there for this deal to be done.
And it does seem like she was pouring cold water on the idea that they would be coming to the table at all with any kind of compromise on that front, especially linking it to the fact that New Zealand's been quite vocal about Kiwis being deported back to New Zealand when they don't have a connection there, but if they do have a criminal past. And so it does seem like there has been a bit of politicking going on, but she said no recent conversations too. That's also interesting.
No, but it sounds to me like that is very much a Prime Minister who is happy to move ahead with this resettlement arrangement. The deal is still there, and the idea that there would be a government visa condition in this country, which would stop any of those individuals ever coming to Australia, is not a deal breaker from what we just heard there with Jackson Williams. So an interesting development there, which